Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. This is going to be a drum mixing tutorial, and this is part one of a two-part series. This tutorial does use plugins, and I have links to all those in the description below. In part one, we are covering the kick, snare, and toms, and then in part two, we'll cover overheads, rooms, and any other processing I'm doing. Today I'm going to show you how to change your drum sound from this to this. All right, so let's get started. To jump in, I am using Logic Pro, as you can see, and the only other plugins I'm using are the Slate Digital plugins. So they look like this. It's like a subscription. I think it's like $10, $15 a month. And then the only other thing I have is, where is it? A FabFilter Saturn here. It's like a multi-band saturation kind of thing. But I'll get more into that in a bit. To start, I want to explain to you how I have my routing set up because it's a little complicated. Okay, so the way I have my buses set up is I have a channel for each close mic that I used in the recording and also the overheads in the room and all that. Each one of these goes to a group based on that drum. So in other words, all the kicks go to the kick bus, all the snares go to the snare bus, that type of thing. So these are not actually going straight to your stereo out. These are all going, so these are going to bus 2, this is grabbing bus 2, sending out to bus 10. So all of the close mics and room mics are doing that, all going to their subgroups and going to bus 10, which is this drum dry here. From there, I have a lot of other routing effects and sends happening, and those all return here. And then all of those, I guess subgroups, but a little more important than subgroups, all of those sum down to drum master, where I do a little more processing, and from there it would go out, join in with the rest of the band and whatnot. So it's a little complicated, but it allows me an extra layer of control on everything that I do. Okay, let's dive into these close mics. I'm going to start with Virtual Mix Rack on this sub kick. So if you're not familiar with Virtual Mix Rack, it's essentially one plugin that has lots of different modules that you can drag and drop in there and do all sorts of things with. So I like it because it's just everything in one place and it's really easy to get to everything. So I'm going to start with this first unit here. It's called FG Dynamics, and it's modeled after an SSL if you're a gearhead like me. So I'm going to start with the compression up here. And a lot of what I do on all the drums is the same, so it's a consistent sound across the board. So I always set this to 3 on the ratio and very fast release. I do not press the fast attack because I want the transient to kind of cut through. And if you have the fast attack on your compressor, it's going to eat that transient. So this will probably load in somewhere around here when you open it up. And I just pull this until I start to get that first light there. Which that just means we're getting around 3 decibels of gain reduction, which is all I want for each close mic. From there, I'm going to mess with the gate and get that dialed in. So I'm going to pull this range down until I usually just go all the way with it unless I feel strongly otherwise. This threshold is what you're going to use the most of, and you're going to turn it up until you stop hearing the other drums. So when it's way down here, everything's coming through and it's not cutting anything out. And as we turn it up, you'll start to see it close. And then we're going to keep going and try to get that snare out of there. There we go. And once you get that set, you can mess with the release to shape the release of the drum. So if you want it really tight and fast, you turn the release down, and the more you turn it up, the more tail you're going to get on it. Somewhere in the middle is where I like it. So that's all we're doing there. For this EQ here, whew, that's a lot. So what I always start off doing is there's always some mud in all drums. So we gotta find that and take that out. So the way I do that is boost and then sweep it around the frequency. So you just hear something bad. Right in there is not great. This Q thing, you can leave it between 1 and 2. The wider you go, the lower the number, the more frequencies you're going to be affecting. And the more narrow you go, it's smaller. Let's see if I can show you that. Okay. So essentially, this is a narrow Q, a really small number. It's like really surgical. And then if you lower the number, you get a wide Q. It's very smooth and natural sounding. Just a quick tidbit there. Okay, back to this. I usually like it somewhere in the middle because I don't want it too dramatic either way. So we're going to cut that out. Something like that sounds good. Same thing down here. And cut that out. And now, since this is the sub kick, this is the lowest thing on the kit, I need it pumping the subs. So we're going to push that like that. There's this option down here for bell or shelf. I usually do bell because you're going to have the bass moving around down there too, so you don't want to take up too much of the low end. And then you have this filter here that will pull out lows. So I pull it up until I start to hear the lows going away and then back it up from there. There we go. So that'll just keep your super low frequencies out of there and keep you from muddying everything up. And then the last thing I do is I have this trimmer here, and that allows me to pull the gain back down because I like everything hitting around -12 here. That'll just help keep volume from piling up on the output. So that's it for that one. Now we're going to start moving down the mics here. All right, kick out. So same thing here, doing a little bit of compression, same settings there. And so one thing to note, since I'm already getting a bit of a tail from the sub kick, I have this release a little faster. Because this is more of the trying to get the click and the texture rather than the low end. So then I'm going to check out these frequencies. So I'm cutting that out, and I'll show you in a minute on the kick in where we're going to get that back, that top end. There's the mud. Get it out. Same thing, get it out. And we're not going to boost low end here because we've got it coming from the sub kick. Okay, moving on to the kick in. I'll let you hear it bypassed. That's what we started with. Here's with the effect engaged. So same thing up here, around 3 on the ratio. The threshold is down where I can get some gain reduction, fast release, slow attack. And then on the gate, same thing here. On this, I was messing with the fast attack on the gate to try to get a little more punch, but I would just engage it, disengage it, and see what you like better. See what works best for you. So see if this release is slow, you start to hear those toms coming in. So we're going to get that release going really fast to cut those toms out. Nice. And I know that sounds short, but when you add in all the other drums, you get that release from the sub kick. There we go. Same thing here. It looks like there was just a little bit of mud around 500. All right. And same thing here. I use the trimmer to get the output back up to -12. So that's it for the processing. And at this point, I will go ahead and set a balance between these three mics to get the kick sound that I want. One thing that's important to note is I'm also going to make sure that the output on these kicks does not exceed -12. All right. Moving on to the bus processing for this. If you look at each bus, you'll notice I just have a compressor and then the Fab Filter Saturn. So I'll show you what this compressor is doing. It's not much. It's literally 1 dB right there. This is just to help level out if he hits the kick harder or softer sometimes, and helps blend the mics together, glue them together a little better. I have a pretty slow attack of 18 milliseconds and a fast release because we want that transient to cut through, but then the compression to go away. So that's all he's doing. Now this plugin is my favorite. This essentially lets you distort different bands of the frequency spectrum differently. So it allows me to add some saturation to the top end without adding it to the low end. Because if you add too much to the low end, you start to get this weird crunchiness in a bad way. But this allows me to just pull up certain frequency ranges. I'll turn it all the way off so you can hear it as I blend it in. So that's what we got. And I always use the warm tape because what I'm trying to do is get that tape saturation so it doesn't sound as digital. So I'll start to turn it up here. Yeah, the good crispiness there. It's very much to taste, and depending on the style too. If you want it really aggressive, I add a little more. If I'm going for more of a vintage sound, I dial it back. Just set it how you like it. Okay. Moving on to snare. Same thing as before. Here we go. We've got the ratio around 3. This is almost the same on everything. I'm actually not even, oh, yeah, we are compressing just a bit. So on the snare, I usually use the snare top as the impact, and then the snare bottom as the tail. So I'm going to set the release a little faster on the snare top so it gets out of the way. That usually helps cut down on the hi-hat bleed. I know this sounds extreme, but as we start to add more things in, it just works. I don't know how to explain it. Like the overheads in the rooms will add in that release that we're used to hearing. And then onto the EQ. So in this instance, I'm actually going to boost because I want some of that around 3K is the good like smack sound. Something like that. And then I cut out some mud here at around 600. That's what that sounds like. One thing I want to point out is I used a bit of a wider Q, a wider width here for the boost because I do want it to sound a little more natural. And then for the cuts, I am a little smaller because it's more surgical and we're just removing something bad. Okay, and then for the low end, I'm doing the bell again so I don't boost everything. And I'm filtering out. If you go too high, you lose some of that low end. But somewhere down there is good. And then for this, the impact can be anywhere from like 120 all the way up to 200. So I recommend boosting through there and just sweeping and finding where it hits the hardest. I like that right there. And then same thing here, trimmer to back this back down. You guessed it, -12. Okay, snare bottom. Hear how I set this one a little more splashy than the snare top? Whereas, you know, I had the snare top more in this area. We do want it closed again. We want the gate closed again before that kick hits. It's never going to be perfect. You just have to get it as close as you can, and that's it. That's the fact of using live drums, is they're not perfect. Okay. On to the EQ. On this one, I went all the way up to 16K and boosted. And I'll let you hear what that sounds like without. It's that real sizzly top. There's a little bit of something there I didn't like, but not a lot, so I didn't take a lot out. Oh, that's just bad. And I ended up boosting a little bit down here to give it some more thump. And then gotta level it out. There we go. So then with the snare top, and I'll show you the phase example again here because it's really prominent on snare. So if I flip one of these, here it gets really kind of thin and nasally. So you want to make sure, just click through that whenever you're mixing your drums and make sure that it's sitting as best it can. Okay, now I'm gonna balance these levels for the subgroup here. And for snare, that usually means just turning down the snare bottom, because we want more of the snare top sound anyway. It's just there to add a little bit of kind of sparkle on the top and a little bit of that splash sound. I just realized we had this on the whole time, but that's okay. Okay, and then for the compressor, same thing. I'm only going for 1 dB or 2. Just to kind of gently level it out across the board. And then here's Saturn. I'll let you hear with these a little lower, and I'll dial it in. So there's a point where it becomes too much. That sounds pretty good. Okay, moving on to toms. So, because I'm a little crazy, I cut out the toms except for when they're being played. So if you see here, there's all these little spots where the toms play, and that's the only spot that the audio file is actually existing. So I'll zoom in here a little so you can see. I end up cutting it a little bit before the tom hits, and then give it a fade out before the next drum hits. So it's almost like manual gating if you think of it that way, but it just helps the gate work better and helps get rid of bleed across the board. So here's what it sounds like without anything. Here's some more. I know it sounds a little weird like that, but once you gate it out, it's a whole lot cleaner and easier to deal with. So we'll get the power loop here. Okay. So all of these are very similar to everything else. So we'll start with tom 1. So on all of these, since I already kind of made the tail how I want over here, I actually roll with a pretty long release. And then I don't have to worry too much about the gate opening when I don't want it to, because it's not, because I cut out all the audio. It's kind of cheating, but there's no rules. You do what you want. So same thing, getting a little bit of compression. I have the gate dialed in how I want it to release, so I have the right kind of tail. And then on the EQ, it's important to get rid of rumble below the frequency you want. So I'll just start pulling this up until we hear that fundamental low end go away, and then we'll back it up a little bit. So it got thin around right somewhere in here. So we'll go back. That looks good right there. Sounds good. All right, I'm gonna go looking for some mud. Apologize ahead of time about this. It's gonna be a little annoying. So there's a bit of kind of mud and cymbal in there that I'm gonna pull out. Not too much. Here's all that kind of mud and boxy sound. On toms, you can take so much of that out and it just keeps making it sound better. And then you can turn this to bell so it's just a small area and sweep around a bit until you find where the low ends at, and then you can bump it up if you want more. That feels good. And then put the trimmer on, make sure it's back at -12. Perfect. If you want to add some top end, you can look around 7.5 or 8K and push that up. But careful not to do too much because you will start to get some cymbal bleed that way. Just a touch. Okay, I'm going to quickly go over the settings for the other two toms, although it's very similar, just a little bit different on the frequencies because the drum's a different pitch. So tom 2 here. Pulled out mud again around 800. This time I boosted around 3.5, boosted again around 7.5, and then boosted, what is that, 187. A lot. I'm actually not going to boost that. I'm not liking it now. Maybe a little. So much mud. Oh, fight me. Great. And then make sure that's back at -12. Great. Real quick on the floor tom. Nasty. Big ol' cut out of there. Add a little low filter here. It's important to cut out, especially below 20, because you can't hear it, and it's going to start adding up across all your tracks and just slowly make your mix muddy and bogged down. And you need to save room down there for like your kick and bass and that kind of stuff. All right. Whoops, I took that right off screen. Okay. So all of these, again, go to the tom bus with a little bit of compression going on. And good old Saturn. Here's a spot you can add in more of that top end, that transient sound, if you didn't want to push it on the EQ. And this is nice because it adds it to all of them across the board, and you don't have to go to each channel and change things. Yeah. Great. So now let's check what we have so far with just the kicks, snares, and toms. Not bad. Not bad. We're getting there. Hey, thanks for watching. That wraps up part 1. Be sure to check out part 2 to see the rest of the drum mixing. If you like this, please be sure to like and subscribe. Thanks.